How's it going, y'all? It's your boy Raymond back up in here with another video, and today we are going to be talking about, finally, my top 10 albums of 2024. 2024, oh my god. This year was a little weird for me because I wasn't all that interested really in, like, a lot of the new music that came out this year. And I know that kind of sounds weird to say because, you know, like, I run, like, a channel and, you know, I'm supposed to be listening and reviewing all this stuff, but you know, obviously, since I rebooted the channel, I have listened to a lot of stuff in the past few months that have come out this year. This year was really big for me in terms of films that I watched and albums that I listened to that didn't come out this year. I'm going to be doing this video and also the top 10 films of 2024 video as well. And I think I'm going to do probably like separate videos on maybe like my favorite albums and films that I enjoyed this year that didn't come out this year, and I think I'll probably do those as separate videos. There was so much stuff that I enjoyed listening to and watching this year that, you know, obviously didn't come out this year that I would really love to talk about, and I think making those into their own videos would sort of be able to separate out everything for you guys, and so that I can give my thoughts on those because I would really love to. But I mean, all in all, I would say this year was definitely sort of solid, but I do want to address one thing, at least in terms of like the music and film stuff. Out of like the post-COVID years so far, over like the past few years, I don't know, like it has kind of been like a mixed bag. I think last year was really quite solid for both movies and music for me in terms of everything that was coming out. I don't know, this year kind of felt like a little bit of like a downturn for me, just in the stuff that I was listening to and the movies that came out this year. I just wasn't all that interested in like a majority of them, and a lot of the stuff, especially during the summer that was coming out, was just not it for me and just did not hit for me. But on the musical front, I would definitely say that this year at least still had some really nice highlights. But definitely in years past, you know, this year was really just in terms of like the new stuff that was coming out for both music and film. It just wasn't necessarily like it for me this year. So I'm hoping 2025 is going to be sort of a refresh and a return to what we had like pre-COVID. Like 2019, I think, was really sort of like the last really great year of film that we've really had over like the past 5 years. So, you know, hoping that we get to return to a place similar to that maybe next year. Obviously, there's a lot of projects that, you know, have been teased and trailers that have come out, and a lot of movie news and music news over the past couple of months of stuff that's going to be released next year. So I'm looking forward to that. But obviously, that's next year. This is still 2024. As I'm recording this, literally, I'm going to be cranking both of these videos out before New Year's Eve. Now we have my top 10 of 2024. We're going to start from the bottom. We're going to start from number 10, and we're going to go all the way to the top. So obviously, as I was in the process of making this video, this was definitely something that was a little bit cutthroat, especially over like the past month when I started listening to a lot more projects that I hadn't listened to previously. And a lot of the stuff that was sort of that I was really enjoying from the first half of the year was slowly starting to fizzle out towards like the back half of this year. But then again, you know, as I was listening to more stuff, I was sort of starting to, you know, see what was really going to be like the biggest albums for me that I really enjoyed and that I think will be sustaining and that I will return to over the course of time, and especially through next year as well as we get more and more releases. And so surprisingly, at number 10 is an album that did come out earlier this year and that I'm surprised actually I still return to and would still like to return to quite a bit going forward. And that is the new Remi Wolf album, Big Ideas. For those of you who don't know who Remi Wolf is, she is still like a smaller indie pop artist. I saw her back in 2019 when she opened up for Still Woozy, and I was like, oh my god, like, who is this chick? She has incredible energy, a really cool and interesting style, and that was back in 2019. I think at the time she had like 300,000 followers on Spotify or something like that. It was crazy. She was super small, and now she has like millions of streams online. She has a song that's been in like an iPhone commercial. She's just been blowing up over like the past 5 years, and honestly, she completely deserves it. I think her voice, I think her talent is really incredible. And on this album, specifically Big Ideas, I think she definitely proves that. Her previous album, Juno, that took a little bit of time to settle in for me when I first heard that album, but her new album, Big Ideas, from the very first single, Cinderella, when that came out, oh my God, that single was awesome. That really got me excited for the album when that first came out. And with each single that progressed, I could definitely see that she was going in a different direction and more of like an alternative rock direction, away from sort of like the pop stuff that she was doing previously. I think the thing that really sells this album for me, though, is really just a lot of like the deeper cuts that have a lot more of these soulful, playful elements to them. Stuff like Motorcycle and stuff like Alone in Miami sort of really give this album a lot of range to deal with, especially on like Motorcycle, where you have this really slow, almost like ballad-esque, kind of jazzy piece that she really likes to play with. And I think the album as a whole is really something that is really fun to listen to and to get into. Do I like it more than Juno? I think currently I would say that they're about the same, but I think I like Juno just a tad more, just because I think there's more flavor and there's more that she's playing around with on Juno, whereas this album is a little bit more concise with its concept and with its sound palette. But that means, honestly, like she really had like the budget to work with on this album, I think, and you can definitely hear it in the production. She has like a whole band behind her at like a lot of the album, especially on Cinderella, for example, with a lot of like the horn sections and the different little instrument sections that pop in here or there. It's just really fun, and I think it's really interesting to listen to. I guess the main things that I would say that I wouldn't care for so much and why it's at number 10 is just some of like the album cuts don't really quite give the same amount of power and energy that something like a Cinderella or like an Alone in Miami have. Even Toro, I would say. You know, I think they're still really fun, and I think overall it's a fairly solid album. Now for number 9, you could not have told me in 2024 that this band was all of a sudden going to release an album, and it was also going to be a good album. It was going to be one of in my top 10 albums for this year. But of course, this always seems to happen to me where I listen to an older artist and I listen to an older band, and then all of a sudden they announce something, whether it's a film, it's a new project, it's a side project. This happened with Radiohead and The Smile. And this also happened with Queens of the Stone Age when they released their album last year. Now it's going to happen with my number 9 band and my number 9 album, The Cure's Songs of a Lost World.
Every time you kiss me, I could cry, she said. Don't tell me how you miss me.
There we go. Had to pull out the Cure shirt for this one. I think what's so interesting about this album specifically is just the way that the Cure, like in Robert Smith, they really sort of get back to basics on this one. A lot of the songs feel really drawn out. This album specifically really feels a lot more like Disintegration or like Pornography era, or like even it gives me even a little bit of that sound from Faith, really digging deep in their discography and sort of pulling from those aesthetics. And really driving those forward in these sort of new breath of fresh air versions of those songs for sure. But it is still very much The Cure, and it is still very much in that goth aesthetic still. You know, you have songs like War Song and End Song, you know, these really long tracks that really have like these incredible builds, and also the album is really like nice and short. The tracks necessarily aren't short, but the album's only 9 tracks, which is honestly kind of nice. If The Cure was just to do this for like, I don't know, until like Robert Smith dies at this point, like I don't know when they're going to stop, if they're ever going to stop. But I mean, it's just incredible to see how these guys are still able to make music. Robert Smith, I just recently saw The Cure live last year, and they were just incredible. It's amazing that Robert Smith at this age is like able to still sing, and he's able to still play guitar like he was back in the day. And it was just amazing. The concert was like 2.5 hours. It was crazy. And I think it was really impressive. And everybody was sort of wondering, like, the tour name is literally like the name of the album. So everybody was going like, they were supposed to release it last year, but then it didn't ever come out. But they toured the whole like album cycle technically, but not really. Like the name of the tour was supposed to be the name of the new album, and now it's finally come out, which is slightly confusing, but it is what it is. And so now that it's here, I'm like really into it. I was kind of surprised because it really got built up, and a lot of people really responded to it. Of course, obviously a lot of people have been Cure fans for a long time. And there's a lot of new people, especially my age, who have found the Cure more recently and have gone back in their discography and have really enjoyed their older music. And so I think this album for sure definitely has that place, and it definitely was a surprise to me. Especially with a band that is so old, it is so difficult to really still have that spark and to really still have that ambition to make something that is interesting, that is very vibrant, and is still very much true to their sound. They're just not like regurgitating past versions of themselves, which I think is really cool. Another band that does a really good job of doing this, in my opinion, is like a Queens of the Stone Age, like I mentioned before, or like a Radiohead, and now they're doing sort of like their own stuff. And so yeah, it's rather rare to sort of see an older band be able to progress and adapt and innovate at this age as they've continued to go on in the band's existence. And so I think The Cure being able to do that over the past, 40, 50 years of their existence is really impressive. And so now, speaking of an artist that I previously mentioned before, I was lucky enough to see this band a couple of years ago with some friends of mine, and we drove all the way up to San Francisco to go see them. And we spent we drove up there and spent like a whole weekend up there just to see them play live, because it really is such a special event for us. Whenever these guys, whether in the original form that they were in the original band, or on the side project that they're currently in now, either way, I'm all for seeing them live, and I'm all for supporting them, because I think these guys are really some amazing musicians. And their third album now, which is that they've released in like the past 3 years, which is insane, really sort of surprised me, and has really sort of been like a consistent sound that has really surprised me, coming out of sort of the absence of the original band. And of course, I'm talking about The Smiles' new album, Cutouts.
Zero song, mood boy. A cutout, turn up the boy.
I think the thing that really just makes The Smiles such an interesting little side project from Tom York and Johnny Greenwood and Tom Skinner is just the fact that you have something that feels like it's Radiohead, but it has its own distinct sound to go along with it as well. And so for people like me, or for people, who haven't really gotten into the Radiohead like newer stuff, or like the back catalog or something, and you sort of dive into this, it's sort of like a little bit of a breath of fresh air, and it's definitely a different sound. And I think a lot of that is due to Tom Skinner. I think his percussion, and I think the way that he crafts a lot of the drum parts and the rhythmic aspects of their music is really sort of what starts to set them apart. You can tell Johnny also has like a lot more freedom to sort of do stuff that is similar to his soundtracking work, which I think is what he is really more interested in doing right now. Obviously, Tom is having a ton of fun just being able to play like bass and guitar and do a whole bunch of like the singer-songwriter stuff, and just play like all of the different instruments that he wants to play. And it just feels like the three guys are really just having fun, even if it is outside of the Radiohead context. Obviously, I think all three of them are really great musicians in their own right. And, obviously I would love to have a new Radiohead album coming out sometime soon. But honestly, for now, I will take a new Smile album. I think Cutouts is no exception to that. I didn't really listen to a whole lot of like the previous album, Wall of Eyes. I just, I remember listening to it like a couple of times last year, and then I was like, I was decently interested in it, but I think this album really has a little bit more of that Tom Skinner effect on it. There's a lot more percussive aspects on this album. And I remember really when that first album came out from them 3 years ago, it was really sort of like this this thing of like, okay, you know, if they're not going to do Radiohead, like what are they going to do? And I was happy to see that it's at least something that is its own thing, but it also feels like it's kind of like a Radiohead 2.0, I guess you could say, in a way. And you could also just remove it completely from that band's aesthetic in general, but you know, obviously it's hard to when you have like two of the members from the band in there and you have Tom's voice. This easily could have been just something that Tom could have done like on his own, but he loves collaborating with Johnny, and both of them really love collaborating with Tom Skinner, which I think is really cool. And so I think they really created something that is really special here, and on a 3-album run so far. You know, I'm excited to see what they have next, but obviously I would still love to have a Radiohead album in the future, possibly. I don't know, like, I'm happy with the Smile albums, of course, but I would also really love to have a Radiohead album, like, please. They are my favorite band of all time, so I don't know. I think either way, I think this album is really solid, and I think it is one of the best albums of this year. Now, this next album was something that I kind of, like, missed a little bit earlier this year when it came out, but to say that this person has had like a huge impact on me would be like such an understatement. Literally in our band Alphabet Soup, we literally named a song after this artist just because we were so inspired by her and by the band that she's from. I was just so excited to hear that she was finally coming out with a solo project, and I was just so pleased when I finally got to finish it last month. I know it came out way earlier this year, but I only heard the singles, and I just never got around to listening to the full thing around like the whole Brat Summer stuff and all of the stuff that was happening in the spring and through the summer. Honestly, I'm glad that I got to listen to it in the fall, because this definitely feels like a fall album. And of course, I'm talking about the new Beth Gibbons solo album, Lives Outgrown. God, I keep forgetting how many band shirts I have. Jesus Christ. Okay. So if you guys don't already know, I have been a big Portishead fan for like the past few years. Ever since the first time I heard Dummy in full, I just really fell in love with them. And I was so bummed that they weren't going to be releasing like a new project or touring even, especially when they were announcing that they were going to play a couple of festivals during COVID, like a few years ago. People were sort of going like, oh, are they back together? Are they going to be making new music? Or is there a new album on the way? Are they at least going to tour a little bit? But no, they just did like 3 like festival performances for like some charity stuff over in Europe, which is fine. But you know, I wanted more. You know, obviously I'm a big fan of theirs, and I just wanted to hear some new Portishead, especially this year when I feel like there is sort of like this, a little bit of this revival of the trip hop sound that's sort of coming back. Honestly, we kind of got the next best thing, which is this new Beth Gibbons album. Lives Outgrown is really kind of feels like a little bit of a back to basics, especially for Beth too. It sort of like removes itself a bit from the Portishead sound while still keeping in tune with this more experimental art rock sound that, you know, a lot of the members from Portishead are still really known for. Obviously, the production here is very percussive, and the production here also has a lot of elements that you might see sprinkled out throughout a Portishead album. You've got like the interesting string arrangements. You've got the very percussive orchestral elements going throughout. There's even like a children's choir in a couple of songs. You just have Beth's vocals, which are just soaring and just cover all of the songs like butter. And I think it's really incredible to see her still putting out work like this after all of this time, especially removed from Portishead as well. And I think this album specifically just sort of gives you a little bit of an insight into maybe the direction that she really wanted to go post their previous album Third. I remember when the single Floating on a Moment came out, and I was just sort of blown away at this orchestration. And funny enough, honestly, when I heard the singles that were coming out, they almost reminded me a little bit of like Moon-Shaped Pool era Radiohead, just the way that the percussive elements and like a lot of the mix of textures with the string arrangements and a lot of like the backing choir stuff that comes in here or there across the album. It almost kind of reminded me of that, and it was really really shocking to hear it after, especially after that first single. Yeah, it was just great. And I can't believe that it took me like so long throughout the year to actually sit down and finish the album when I thought the singles were fantastic. But I'm glad I finished it like about a month ago. I'm glad I waited so long, because honestly, I think it really settled in for me now. And going back and revisiting those singles just made me love the album even more. And I think as a whole, it really is very representative of what she was going for and what she is hopefully going to be doing maybe going forward. I don't know if there's more music in the chamber, if there's more Portishead stuff on the way that might be asking a lot. I know I'm asking for a lot of older bands to come back, but like I love these bands so much, and this is really from like an era and an artist that I really respect, and I can't wait to hear more of if there is more. I know I've spent a lot of time sort of addressing a lot of these sort of rock, more art rock, alt rock, indie rock inspired albums and in this genre that we sort of been floating in for a little while. So this next album is definitely going to be a big change from that, and was an album that I don't think anybody was expecting to come out, especially after all of the events of this year. I'm not even gonna like tease it that hard, because you know there's just so much that I want to talk about with this album. And it is of course Kendrick Lamar's GNX.
The blueprint is by me, Mr. Get Off. I get off at my feet.
Okay, first of all, if there was ever a time to be living in LA, this would be the year. If there was ever a time to be like representative of LA, this is absolutely the year of all years to be in LA. I don't need to recount history at this point. You guys know that, like, you guys know the beef that happened earlier this year. You guys know the Kendrick and Drake story. I don't need to recount any of it for you. However, it is sort of crucial to understand a lot of the stuff that happened earlier this year to understand why something like GNX came out. It is interesting that, you know, after everything that happened earlier in the year with the Kendrick and Drake stuff, that all of a sudden we get a surprise drop on a goddamn like Friday morning. I remember waking up and I slept in and I had like 5 messages on my phone from people, and like Instagram was blowing up when this thing dropped, and I had no idea. Like, I was in the middle of finals week and this thing dropped, and I'm just like, how am I supposed to concentrate when Kendrick Lamar just surprise drops some shit? And this was the same issue that happened in the spring. I'm like all the Kendrick and Drake beef stuff happened during finals week, and I was dealing with so much other shit, and then all of a sudden like this Kendrick and Drake stuff was going on, and I'm just going like, dude, what? It's incredible to see that there's just a surprise drop from Kendrick Lamar in the year 2024. And the album is pretty freaking good. I unfortunately was not one of the lucky ones to get tickets to go see the live show over the summer, but you know, obviously like the surprise little snippet for Squabble Up and like the They Not Like Us music video, and like there was a lot of teasers definitely towards some of the tracks on this album, but to see them finally actually be here and to listen to them and to especially to play these songs in the car. GNX is probably like one of the most LA albums like of all time. It is such a tribute to LA, and it also is just a giant victory lap for Kendrick, honestly. This album didn't need to come out. The guy made his point like this year. Like this year was like the year of Kendrick Lamar. He didn't need to release anything else after They Not Like Us. He could have rode that for the next year and a half. The dude is performing at the Super Bowl. Like none of this needed to happen. And yet still we got a surprise album. Like, come on, man. Like the dude is like one of the icons of the 21st century, honestly. And this album really proves it. Squabble Up obviously is fantastic. I think Squabble Up is really one of the more fun cuts of this year, especially for hip hop. The album isn't only just bangers though. Like there's obviously, you know, some cuts that hit a little bit deeper, and that he's dealing with some themes that are a little bit reminiscent of something like Mr. Morale, but he's also diving into something that is a lot more current that's going on, and he's sort of reflecting on him and this whole beef, this whole year, really, the back and forth and everything that happened in the culture over the past year and reflecting on that in the album itself, which is really crazy. It's almost kind of like you're watching an artist who seems to be really kept up like with the times and really has like a vision and understands sort of like the cultural atmosphere that is going on, and is making his statement and his mark on it, to be honest. And so I think that alone really just sort of solidifies this album as one of the most important of this year. And I think Kendrick Lamar is probably like the biggest artist of this year as well. And I'm sure Not Like Us will probably win a Grammy. I can't wait to hear these songs at the Super Bowl. It's going to go crazy. I have no idea what that's going to be like either. Like, is there going to be like more music that's going to come out, before the Super Bowl? Is there like more? Is there more stuff planned? I have no idea. There's tracks on the SZA Deluxe album with him, supposedly. I haven't even had time to listen to that yet. But yeah, it's just crazy. This album is just so fun. And, it has like the mix with the cuts that are a lot more thematic, but it also just has some cuts that are just like really fun. And I think Kendrick is just having a fun time while he's also digging a little bit into his bag on this album. Kendrick wears like so many faces and so many voices on this album. Like, the dude can just pull off any sort of weird accent, any sort of like funny little caricature on this album. And I think that is really sort of what makes it such an enjoyable listen. Honestly, I think it's one of the best albums of this year, and it's just incredible that we even got it. And I don't need to go into any more. About Kendrick Lamar. You guys know exactly what's going on. Now, talking about putting on a lot of caricatures and a lot of voices, this next album by this next artist was really something that was both really inspiring to hear, but also kind of really sad as well, just because it did involve the death of one of my current favorite bands, and maybe they'll get back together at some point. I don't know. I made a whole video about it. I'm hoping that this truly is not going to be, sort of like the way that it is going forward forever, but who knows? And we already have a new album from the guy, so I mean, it's looking like that could be the way. But if it is true that we're going to be getting some more solo material from each of the members of Black Midi, then I'm glad that it's going to sound this good, and hopefully the new Cameron album sounds this good. And of course, I'm talking about the new Jordy Griep album, The New Sound. Now, unfortunately, this album does come at the expense of the departure of the band Black Midi, which I've seen twice. They've really been sort of like my favorite band of the past 5 years, and to see them disperse so quickly is really disappointing. But, I guess according to everything that I've heard from like the band members about them breaking up, it seems like it was something that was mutual, and it didn't seem like there was a whole lot of beef between everybody, and it just seems like they're all sort of okay going in different directions. But maybe in the future, maybe there will be a reunion album, or maybe they'll get back together because they miss each other. I don't know. To say the least, I think Hellfire is really sort of a great ending point for the band. I think that's their best album, and if they want to end the band on their best album, then honestly, I'm okay with that. To hear The New Sound and to hear where Jordy is going to be going from here on out, it definitely seems like there is going to be some carrying of the torch here. The New Sound is really keeping in touch with that sort of post-punky vibe that we got from Hellfire and from the previous Black Midi stuff, but it is sort of without that more singer-songwriter aspect that was delivered throughout and sprinkled throughout Hellfire as well. As I've sort of done more research, it seems like Jordy was really the one that was wanting to go more in this sort of post-punk kind of like experimental art rock direction, and it seems like Cameron was really the one who wanted to go more into the singer-songwriter area. To hear like a whole album of just the stuff that Jordy was wanting to do is really fun. And honestly, there's also like a Latin groove, like a Latin music kind of vibe sprinkled throughout this album as well. It's so fun. Like, all the instrumentals sound great. I remember when Holy Holy came out and I was hearing that and I was just like, There's congas, there's like shakers. The rhythm section is popping off on this track. Also, the music video is like hilarious. Obviously, Jordy Grieb is a very talented dude, and you know, he can obviously carry his own, as this album does, going throughout. And I think the new sound really is something that is very impressive, coming off of something where, you know, the band had only been together really for about like 5 or 6 years. And now all of a sudden in its wake, we have this Jordy Grieb solo album that is really just taking what was there in the Black Midi camp and just bringing it forward, maybe stripping away the stuff that was influenced by the other members. But it is almost like a little bit of like a Hellfire 2.0, I guess you could say. It does have a lot of that post-punk aspect. It still has that King Crimson type of instrumental. I think keeping in that, the album sounds just fantastic. And I think also I heard Jordy talking about how he was like sort of flying all over the world or something when they were touring, wanting to experience like different music cultures and stuff like that. And so that kind of explains these Latin instrumentals and these Latin influenced tracks. It's even better for it because that is like right up my alley. I'm super into that. These sort of jazzy Latin grooves that feel very flavorful and feel like they are definitely fleshed out to the fullest on this album. And then you get some of like a lot of like the typical sort of elongated King Crimson-esque cuts, like the closer on this album. And I think overall it's just a solid project. This is something that I've noticed from a lot of the newer bands that have come out over like the past 5 to 10 years, is that a lot of them have started doing a lot more solo stuff early on. This has been happening with like Adrian Lenker and Big Thief. This just happened with the lead singer Cameron Winter from Geese, and we just saw it also with the lead singer from Fontaines DC. So, you know, this is just something that seems like it's just going to be happening. Hopefully this isn't necessarily like a trend where the band has to die so that like the artist can go and do their own stuff, but they can't do anything with like the band kind of thing, you know. I'm hoping it's not going to be like that. But yeah, it does seem like it is becoming a little bit of a trend, and I'm wondering like why that is. But, you know, in the case of this album and the case of Black Midi, if we continue to get music like this, then honestly, I'll be okay with it. Like, I'll take it. It's good. In fact, I would almost say it's great. And so I'm really enjoying it so far. And I think this album is really great. And I hope that there's more that he's going to be releasing in the coming future. This next artist was genuinely one that I was not expecting to listen to this year. I had heard some of her previous stuff over from her previous album during COVID, and I know that was really where she kind of blew up a little bit, even though she's been around since like the early 2010s. When this album came out, it came out, you know, sort of around the Tyler, the Creator hype when that album came out, when Chromacopia came out, and it sort of came out around a lot of the other album drops that were supposed to happen during November. And so it kind of got like a little bit lost in the mix with a lot of the other releases. And I just sort of found it because I had already listened to everything that had sort of come out around that time. And I was looking for more, and I was looking for something that was really sort of going to be like a good fall album. You know, it was November. It was starting to get a little bit colder up here in Northridge, colder as in like 75 degrees, because it's always hot up here for some reason. This album really surprised me in that it became that, and it really sort of became like my beginning of fall album. I'm of course talking about the Laura Marling album, Patterns and Repeat.
Tell me for the millionth time the many fine points to tell your story.
I don't have any Laura Marling merch yet, unfortunately. I apologize. I know I'm breaking consistency here, but whatever. This album really sort of came as a surprise. I don't know what sort of spurred me to listen to this, but it was such a nice and comforting and warm album. I'm not going to dive into it like too much. I just wanted to sort of, you know, I already have a video that I made about this album on my channel. If you guys want to know more about my thoughts on it, go and check that out. But really, this sort of was like the beginning of fall for me. This album, when this album came out, it's just like a warm hug and a nice hot cup of coffee. Put this album on in the background, and it's just fantastic. And I think it's so nice and cozy. And I think the themes of this album are just really, really amazing and really beautiful. Just the idea of motherhood and the idea of having, you know, struggling with the average day-to-day drama while also thinking of what it's like raising a child. And also you just have like this instrumentation and the production on this album that is just so nice and warm, with these beautiful like acoustic guitars, these really lovely string arrangements that are very soft, angelic choirs coming in the background here or there. It's just really lovely, and I think it's definitely one of the best albums of this year. And honestly, I really fell in love with it, and I was listening to it like on repeat for most of the end of November. Shout out her. She's having another kid. Laura, if you're even watching this, I appreciate you, and I hope I get to see you in concert soon. So now we get into the top 3. So now this next album, I have already done a video of it, so obviously, you know, I'm not going to get into it too much again. However, like I've said before on this channel many times, this artist has really sort of been an icon for me. Every release that they've put out that I've heard and that I've listened to, I've heard everything that this artist has put out has just been amazing, especially in the past 5 albums or so that they've released. I just think he's put out some amazing material, and you know, I think he's really going to go down as one of like the signature artists of the 2010s and into the 2020s if he keeps up this album run. It's always a good time when this guy drops, and I'm always looking forward to anything that he is going to be releasing, whether it's shoes, whether it's clothes, whether it's, you know, some perfume, which I currently own, whether it's like, I don't know, some random collaboration, or in this case, some new music. And in this case, I am talking about the new Tyler, the Creator album, Chromacopia.
Chromacopia.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? Like, Tyler, the Creator, he's been one of my favorite artists for a very long time, ever since I was like 16 in high school, and ever since, you know, Flower Boy came out, that just blew me away. His back catalog even before then, and now like 4 albums past Flower Boy, and he's still delivering such quality material, and he's still delivering albums that are pushing the envelope and that are really just innovating, you know. And I think it would have been so easy, especially after the huge success that was Flower Boy as well as Igor, to just continue to sort of regurgitate that kind of vibe like a lot of other artists would, and just give us like some, you know, some like Flower Boys and some Igors part 2s, and, you know, just sort of make like the same kind of stuff for the rest of his career. But instead, you know, we've got Call Me If You Get Lost, and now we have Chromacopia, and Tyler has really just sort of put his all into every project, and it shows. And especially on the storyline of this album, where he's reflecting on his years, he feels like he's growing old. He feels like he's struggling to mature, and it's just a lot of it is a lot of this stuff that we would have never gotten on something like a Flower Boy and an Igor, and I think that speaks to a lot of his artistry. And he's such like a master when it comes to his storytelling capabilities across multiple albums now. The place where he was only like 5 or 6 years ago to where he is now is just incredible, and it's almost like night and day. And to see him progress to this point and get something like a Chromacopia this year is really insane, and is just incredible to see his growth and be able to sort of grow up with him. Like, you know, I was 16 when Flower Boy came out, and to listen to Chromacopia now that I'm like 24 is just so inspiring to me. And it's so inspiring to see everything that he does also outside of music, the way that he does his art direction. He does directing, he does acting, he's a fashion designer, he does collabs with people, and he's one of the most like important artists of our time. And I think only second out of LA after Kenny, and I think that's definitely true. And I think this album definitely proved that to me this year, and it's one of the best albums of this year for sure. At number 2, this album, I will forever regret not making a video or something on this album when this came out, because this album wasn't even like an album. This album was like massive. This album was like a whole like season basically, and it's still kind of going on. I think obviously she had like probably one of the biggest years, if not the biggest year, for an artist this year, maybe next to Kendrick Lamar. It was really cool to see her sort of really get the spotlight finally after being a fan of hers for like the past 4 or 5 years, and to see her sort of progress to this point, and to still see her make this sort of experimental sound at this level of pop. To see the way that she infuses her pop style with a lot of her roots coming from UK house was really something that was super exciting to see, and I just absolutely loved it. I think the deluxe tracks were good. I think a lot of the remixes were very good. This album experience overall was just a fun time, and I of course am talking about Charli XCX's Brat.
When I go to the club, I wanna hear those club cassettes. Club cassettes, club cassettes.
I don't have a bright green shirt, but I have the deluxe album. All right, I'm a fan. Cool, we're good. So yeah, Charli XCX, what a crazy year it has been for her, and this album especially. I was honestly not expecting this album to take over the way that it did. When Von Dutch came out, that single, I was a little lukewarm on it at first, and then it kind of grew on me. And then we got Back to Back, and then we got Club Classics as the singles as well. And I was like, oh, okay, she's really digging into sort of like the UK house, a little bit of that experimental house kind of vibe. And then I saw that A.G. Cook was producing most of the album along with George Daniels. And I was like, okay, she's really diving into that vibe. Mixing the pop with the house, and also with a little bit of hyperpop still crossing over. And I was just excited that we were going to get something that was different from Crash. And boy, is this album different from Crash, like very much so. If this album is anything, it is a fun ass time. Like, this album is just so fun. I have the deluxe because I think the 3 tracks that go along with the album are honestly just as good as the album tracks themselves. Everything from the rollout, from the visuals to the aesthetic. I mean, the album, you've seen the original album cover, but like, it looks like this is the inside. Like, what is that? There's just such an aesthetic put into it, and there's such just like a big middle finger kind of to a lot of what people were expecting about this album. And obviously I know the album cover, like the bright ass green with like the really shitty font. People just had like such a problem with it, and I think the backlash from it honestly helped this album in its favor, because it really made people pay attention, and it really made people sort of go like, like, what is this? Like, why do it like this? But then when you listen to the album, you sort of start to put the pieces together, and you're like, oh, I get it. There really is a really great storyline throughout this whole album, and I think to see Charli sort of reach this point, especially after Crash, where I was a little bit lukewarm on Crash. It's grown on me like a little bit, but when this album came out in full, I was really super into it. The UK house thing is like so up my alley, and I just love the fact that she was able to infuse that with a little bit more of like the hyperpop elements, as well as like the mainstream pop elements. A.G. Cook and George Daniels, they did just an amazing job cooking this album up. The instrumentals are great. The beats go hard. There's just so much booming bass, and I think the way that Charli writes on this album is extremely unique as well. All of the lyrics just feel like there's not a whole lot to sort of dig around into when it comes to her lyrics. She's sort of giving you exactly what she feels, but because of that, you sort of get to paint the picture in your head yourself of how she's depicting her environment and the environment of this album. She paints a picture in your head of what a brat is, I guess you could say, in like a really cliche way that's been tossed around a lot. I know, she really is able to give you like a good visual of what this album represents, what this album is to her, what the type of persona of this album is, and the persona that she put on for this album. I know a lot of people are like critiquing her for like a lot of the persona stuff and the visual aspects and like the rollout and everything, but she said in interviews like multiple times that she likes to switch things up and put on personas for her albums with every new release. So, this is purely really just like a persona of hers that she's able to put on, and I'm sure there's going to be something new that's coming out in the next couple of years where she's going to switch it up again. Maybe she'll do like, I don't know, alternative rock or something crazy. I don't know. She keeps like changing it, but I think because of that, it makes a lot of the listening experiences for her albums super fun, super interesting, very bold, especially with this rollout, very bold indeed, and definitely made a statement. And I think culturally, as well as the quality of this album, really did a lot for this year. It's super fun. I think it's super great, and it is definitely one of the best albums of this year. But I do have a number one. This is still number two, and believe me, once it got to like the top five, this was definitely a little bit cutthroat with what I was, ordering things and the way that I was placing stuff above the other. For a little while, it was looking like Brat was going to be my number one album. But then there was another artist that came out that, was in a similar genre to Charlie for sure, and is even inspired by Charlie's music as well. This is a band that I saw very early on, that I was super excited to see more of, and with every release since, has just been better and better. And with this new album, I think they've reached a peak in their discography, and they're only like 2 albums in, and I cannot wait to see where they're going to go from here. And I'm of course talking about Magdalena Bay and their new album Imaginal Disc, and Imaginal Disc is my favorite album of this year. Imaginal Disc by Magdalena Bay. That was another video that I did make on the channel. So, obviously, if you guys want to know my full thoughts on that, go check that out. But I will say, because it is my number one album of the year, this was definitely a cutthroat race between this and Brat on what was going to be my number one. But I think the thing that really sort of keeps this at the number one spot for me this year is really just the fact that I think I would return to this album like a lot more over time. And I think Brat really sort of represented like a specific like era of this year, where I think Magdalena Bay released something that stood for a bit more and stood for like a peak in their career and a peak in pop music this year, honestly, that I didn't see anywhere else. Just the soundscape, the quality of Imaginal Disc is just absolutely phenomenal. And I think this really sort of shows what pop music has kind of been missing over the past, 4 or 5 years. There were definitely hints of the greatness on their previous record, Mercurial World. While I did really love that album, this album just blew me away in terms of the quality of production, in terms of the instrumentals, the writing of this album, and to see them play the whole thing live as well was just a treat. And honestly, there's not even more that I could really say that hasn't already been said in my review of the album, but I just think it's incredible. It's super fun to listen to, and yet it's also very existential. It's surreal. It's almost scary at times. It's just the complete package. And above all, it's a pop album. And while it's an art pop album, it's a pop album nonetheless. I can't wait to see where they go next. And this album is just, phenomenal. It's a phenomenal body of work. And, if they keep progressing the way that they are, they're really going to be, I think, one of the big pop staple bands of the 21st century. And hopefully they really get like a big blow up like Brat did, because I think they deserve it. And I think this album really is sort of going to catch on over the next few years. And hopefully whatever their next release is just as good, if not better, because I think it would really make a splash. I think they got absolutely snubbed from the Grammys this year. I get that they're a smaller band. I get that like Brat was really the big seller this year, but I think this album really deserves its place in popular music. And I think the band especially deserve that. So hopefully it'll be, it'll get the respect that it deserves, and it'll get like the airtime that it really deserves, because I think it's just phenomenal. If you guys want to know more of my thoughts, go ahead and check out the review video that I did for Imaginal Disc on my channel. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We made it here. It's currently like 3 days before 2025. I finally did it. These are my top 10 favorite albums from this year. I appreciate you guys so much for sticking with me. I know it took me a little while to revive the channel, but honestly, I'm really glad that I did, and I got the experience to go through all of this and, do all of these videos. I'm still going to be doing more as well going into next year, but it's really just been fun, and I've really just enjoyed being able to like do kind of like what I want, actually. And I think previously with like a lot of the reaction review videos, it just wasn't satisfying for me anymore. And I think with this new format that I have going, combining the film and the music aspects of the channel, I think is really fun for me, and I think it's fun to do both at the same time. And it seems like you guys are enjoying it because I've been getting a lot of traction on a lot of my previous videos. I hope you guys enjoy this one, especially. I know this one's going to be a bit of a longer one, but hopefully you guys will enjoy it, and I can't wait to see what's going to be coming out next year. So thank you guys so much for watching. I definitely appreciate it. Stay tuned for my top 10 films of 2024 video that's going to be coming out in like the next day or two. And so yeah, I'm going to be working hard at that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me. And for the new viewers who just found me after I revived the channel this year, thank you guys so much for checking me out. And I'm going to be putting out even more stuff next year. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to like and subscribe down below. And go ahead and give your comments on what you guys thought was your favorite albums of this year. I would love to hear it. I would love to know. I appreciate you guys so much for watching. And I will see you guys in the next video.